If someone had told me that my marriage to Rachel, a 32-year-old woman with a sharp mind and an unrelenting drive, would hit a breaking point so early, I wouldn't have believed them. At 37, I thought I had a solid handle on life and relationships. And with just over 2.5 years of marriage behind us, things seemed stable. Sure, there were the usual bumps along the way, but nothing that signaled real trouble. Until one evening, when a single phone call set the stage for everything that would follow. I was in the living room, lounging on the couch, and catching up on football highlights I'd missed the day before. It was my small escape from the daily grind, a chance to unwind without distractions. But just as I was getting into the groove of the game, Rachel's phone blared from the kitchen. Its sharp, incessant ringing sliced through the commentary, immediately pulling me out of the moment. Annoyed by the interruption, I grabbed her phone, grumbling under my breath as I carried it to her. Rachel was in the kitchen, putting the finishing touches on dinner. I handed her the phone, muttering something about the noise being unbearable, and walked back toward the living room. I assumed she'd handle the call, and that would be the end of it. But no sooner had I settled back on the couch than her phone rang again. The sound echoed through the house like an unwelcome guest. When I peeked back into the kitchen, Rachel was holding the phone with a tense grip, her expression hardening. Her usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced by a mix of irritation and something I couldn't quite place. She looked ready to lash out at whoever was disturbing her, but instead, she picked up the call, her tone sharp and clipped. Something about this interaction felt different. It wasn't the usual work annoyance I'd seen her display before. You see, Rachel and I both had demanding careers in the corporate world. From the start, she'd been adamant about creating boundaries between work and home. She believed weekends were sacred, a time to recharge and reconnect, and she rarely answered work calls unless it was an absolute emergency. Email was her preferred method for handling urgent matters, and she encouraged me to adopt the same approach. It was a system that worked well for us, or so I thought. I lingered near the doorway for a moment, half expecting Rachel to hang up, and ran about the audacity of whoever dared to interrupt her. Instead, her face shifted entirely as she listened. Her anger drained away, replaced by a heavy, unreadable expression. She didn't say much, just nodded silently before ending the call. Something about her body language told me this wasn't just a routine annoyance. I tried to brush it off, but as the evening unfolded, the unease lingered. It wasn't until we sat down for dinner that she finally broke the silence. "They're transferring us out of state," she said, her voice unnervingly steady, like she was delivering a weather report. "Transferring? Why? And to where exactly?" I asked, though a knot was already forming in my stomach. I had a sinking feeling I wouldn't like the answer. Rachel leaned back in her chair and explained the situation with a calmness that only made me more uneasy. Her company, she said, was expanding and needed someone to oversee the development of a new division. Apparently, the board had decided she was the perfect candidate for the role. I understood how these things worked. Corporate transfers were part of the game, but something about this felt off. Married employees weren't typically relocated without thorough discussion, and Rachel hadn't mentioned applying for anything like this. When I suggested she decline the transfer, her response was immediate. "It comes with a promotion," she said, her tone leaving little room for debate. "The one I've been working toward for years." I sat back, absorbing her words. Of course, this was about the promotion. Rachel was one of the most ambitious people I'd ever met, and I admired that about her. At least I used to. Over the past year, she'd poured everything into earning that title, volunteering for extra projects, staying late at the office, and making sure her team of 7 exceeded every expectation. Now, it seemed her hard work was about to pay off, but not in the way either of us had imagined. Her voice softened as she asked, "What do you think I should do?" It was a loaded question, and we both knew it. No matter how I answered, there would be consequences. If I told her to turn it down, I'd risk becoming the villain in her story, the man who held her back from achieving her dreams. On the other hand, if I supported her decision, I'd be setting us up for the challenges of a long-distance marriage, something neither of us had any experience with. "It's not your fault," I said eventually, though the words felt hollow. "But this puts us in a difficult position." She nodded, waiting for more. I hesitated, torn between honesty and self-preservation. In the end, I made the choice I thought would hurt us the least. I'll support you no matter what. If this is what you want, we'll find a way to make it work. Looking back, I wish I had chosen differently. But in that moment, Rachel's face lit up with gratitude, and for a brief second, I convinced myself I'd done the right thing. I wanted to believe we could make it work, that our marriage could survive the strain of distance. After all, people maintain relationships during business trips and military deployments. Why couldn't we? What I didn't realize was that Rachel had already made her decision. My words hadn't swayed her. They had merely given her the approval she wanted. As I watched her excitement grow, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I'd been manipulated. Rachel had framed the situation perfectly, leaving me with no real choice but to agree. For the first couple of months after Rachel moved, it seemed like we had found a rhythm. I even bought her a Bluetooth earpiece so we could stay connected while she worked. Our phone conversations became a regular part of our days, and oddly enough, I felt closer to her during that time than I had when we were living under the same roof. Through those calls, I learned details about her new job, her colleagues, and even her daily struggles, things she rarely shared before. At the time, I convinced myself that prioritizing her ambition over my personal reservations had been the right choice. It felt as if we were in a good place. I'd reassured myself that supporting her career would ultimately strengthen our relationship. But that illusion didn't last. 2 months ago, everything shifted. Rachel called one morning to cancel her scheduled trip back to Michigan. Her tone was casual as she explained that her company's performance over the past quarter had been subpar. She needed to focus on hiring more skilled personnel to lighten her workload and stabilize the new division. I took the news in stride, telling myself it wasn't a big deal. After all, I was on the verge of closing a major deal myself, one that would secure our financial future for years to come. This contract was a game-changer, a multi-million-dollar deal that would not only elevate my career, but also grant me the flexibility to spend more time with Rachel. I kept the deal a secret, intending to surprise her once it was finalized. The thought of celebrating my success together motivated me to stay focused and avoid distractions. For nearly 2 weeks, we barely spoke. The calls that had once connected us dwindled to sporadic texts on WhatsApp. Neither of us had the time for meaningful conversations, but I told myself it was temporary. I poured my energy into sealing the deal, picturing the look on Rachel's face when I told her how our lives were about to change. The deal went through, just as I'd hoped. That night, while I waited for final confirmation from the client, I began planning a surprise vacation for Rachel and me. I booked flights, a luxury hotel, and even mapped out sightseeing adventures. It was my way of showing her that, despite the distance, I was still invested in us. But then everything came crashing down. While scrolling through WhatsApp, I noticed Rachel had updated her status with a photo. In it, she was smiling warmly, arms wrapped around a man I didn't recognize. He had dark hair, piercing blue eyes, and appeared to be in his mid-30s. Beneath the image was a caption that read, "Dark times reveal angels." My chest tightened as I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Who was this man, and why was Rachel calling him an angel? A quick glance at his profile revealed his name, Henry. He was the first hire Rachel had made when she started her new role, someone she had mentioned in passing as being invaluable to her team. At that moment, I should have trusted my instincts. Something about the photo felt off, but I chose to ignore the gnawing doubt. I decided to surprise Rachel in person instead. The next day, I called her Michigan office to confirm her location, claiming I wanted to send her a package. A mutual friend who worked as the receptionist, eager to help, gave me Rachel's California address and promised to keep my visit a secret. During the flight, I imagined her reaction when I told her about the deal and the vacation I'd planned. I envisioned her excitement, her gratitude, and the sense of relief we'd both feel knowing we were finally on the same page again. But reality had other plans. I arrived at Rachel's office first, bouquet in hand, only to be told she hadn't come in that day. The receptionist's reaction to hearing that Rachel was married sent another wave of unease through me. "I didn't know she had a husband," she said with genuine surprise. I didn't press the issue. Rachel was notoriously private about her personal life, so I brushed it off. Armed with the address, I took an Uber to her apartment, still clinging to the hope that this surprise visit would rekindle our connection. As I climbed the 4 flights of stairs to her door, I rehearsed what I'd say, imagining her joy at seeing me. But just as I raised my hand to knock, muffled voices from inside stopped me in my tracks. "Keep going," I heard someone say, followed by a sound I knew too well, Rachel's moan. My entire body froze. A wave of nausea hit me as the realization sank in. In just over 5 months, my wife had managed to destroy everything we'd built. I stood there, paralyzed by a mix of rage, humiliation, and heartbreak. Every ounce of trust I'd placed in her felt like a cruel joke. Fighting the urge to storm inside, I turned away. Bursting into that apartment would only satisfy my anger, not solve the problem. Instead, I walked back to her office, gave the receptionist a $100 tip, and asked her to keep quiet about my visit. Then I checked into a nearby hotel, determined to find out the full extent of Rachel's betrayal. For the next week, I rented a car and shadowed her every move. It didn't take long to confirm what I already suspected. Rachel's routine was predictable: work, yoga, and then hours spent with Henry at her apartment. She seemed oblivious to the fact that I was watching her, even as I called and texted, feigning ignorance. Her replies were curt, filled with excuses about work stress and needing space to sort things out. That was the final straw. Rachel had manipulated me for the last time. I contacted a lawyer, prepared divorce papers, and resolved to confront her once and for all. This time, there would be no hesitation, no second chances. It didn't take long to confirm what I had suspected all along. Rachel and Henry weren't just colleagues. They were practically inseparable. From the way they moved in sync, their stolen glances, and the nights he spent at her apartment, it was painfully clear how deep their betrayal ran. I could almost predict their schedule. She went to work in the morning, followed by yoga classes in the evening, and then straight back to her apartment where Henry would show up not long after. I watched, documenting everything silently, my anger simmering beneath the surface. But it wasn't until I decided to confront her that the full weight of her betrayal hit me. Their relationship wasn't just casual, it was habitual. As I stood outside her door again a few nights later, I heard the same familiar sounds: muffled voices, moans, and laughter that no longer felt like echoes of my past life with Rachel. They were proof of the one she had built without me. This time, though, I didn't walk away. Instead, I quietly unlocked the door using the spare key she had given me long ago. I stepped inside, my phone in hand, and pressed record as I approached the bedroom. What I saw was revolting, yet I forced myself to watch for a full minute, documenting everything. Their careless disregard for me, for the life we had built, only fueled my resolve. When I finally revealed myself, the look on Rachel's face was priceless. Shock, panic, and fear all rolled into one. She scrambled to cover herself, frantically reaching for the sheets as Henry froze, wide-eyed and useless. "You have no idea how low you've sunk," I said coldly, my voice steady despite the fury raging inside me. "But don't worry, everyone else will soon find out." Rachel burst into tears, begging for forgiveness. She stumbled over her words, claiming she would resign, seek therapy, do anything to fix things. But all I felt was disgust. Every time I looked at her, I saw the image of her wrapped around Henry, the life we shared reduced to ashes. Her pleas fell on deaf ears. "Sign the divorce papers," I told her flatly, handing them over. "If you don't, this video goes to everyone you care about, your colleagues, your family, your parents." Her face went pale as the threat sank in. "Please don't," she whimpered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'll do anything. Just don't ruin me like this." But she didn't understand. She'd already ruined herself, and no amount of begging would change that. I turned and walked out without another word, leaving her and Henry to sort through the wreckage. When Rachel finally dropped off the signed papers, she claimed she had resigned from her job. I didn't care. I still sent the video to her parents, making sure they saw the daughter they had raised for who she truly was. The fallout was swift and brutal. Her parents were devastated, their relationship fractured beyond repair. And while some people might call my actions vindictive, to me, they were justified. She had manipulated me, used me, and torn apart everything we had built together. If anyone deserved consequences, it was her. In the months that followed, I tried to move on. I took a much-needed break, booking a week-long vacation to the Dominican Republic. The sun, the beaches, and the change of scenery gave me the clarity I needed to start fresh. While I was there, I received a Reddit notification about my initial post. What started as a way to vent my anger had gained far more attention than I anticipated. I read through the comments, and one in particular stood out. It was from someone who had been in my shoes, someone who regretted not getting enough revenge to satisfy their spirit. That comment stuck with me. On some level, I had felt a grim satisfaction in exposing Rachel to her parents and watching her life crumble. I later learned that she was staying in a motel and working at a nightclub, an ironic twist that seemed fitting for someone who had betrayed me so thoroughly. But deep down, I felt like there was still unfinished business. Then, 3 weeks after returning from my trip, Rachel showed up at my door. She looked like a shadow of the woman I had married. Her eyes were bloodshot, her face puffy from crying, or something else. Whatever struggle she was facing didn't concern me. She was no longer my responsibility. "Aaron, please," she began, her voice trembling. "I've lost everything, my job, my parents, my life. I've suffered enough. Just take me back." The audacity of her request nearly made me laugh. I let her in, more out of morbid curiosity than anything else. She seemed to mistake my silence for consideration and launched into a rambling explanation of her actions. She claimed she never thought I'd go through with the divorce and insisted it was a mistake, a one-time lapse in judgment. Her lies were pathetic. I decided to test her, knowing full well she would fail. "How many times did it happen?" I asked, staring her down. She hesitated for only a moment before swearing. "Once. I swear, Aaron, it only happened once." I almost pitied her in that moment. "Almost. You really think I believe that?" I said, shaking my head. "Do you even hear yourself?" My father always told me it was impossible to lie while looking someone in the eye, but Rachel had proven him wrong. I didn't need to know the exact number of times she had betrayed me. The evidence was overwhelming. If I hadn't followed her, hadn't heard her with Henry that day, I might have been fooled. But there was no undoing the damage she had caused. And then there was Henry. Discovering he was married infuriated me even more. He had betrayed his wife just as Rachel had betrayed me, and I knew I couldn't let him walk away unscathed. Rachel's pleas for reconciliation meant nothing to me. If anything, they only solidified my resolve to see this through, not just for myself, but for the people Henry had hurt as well. Rachel thought she had a chance at redemption. She thought my silence meant I was reconsidering. But she couldn't have been more wrong. I told Rachel I needed time to think. The truth was, I had already made up my mind. As soon as she left, I forwarded the incriminating video to everyone who mattered in her life. Friends, colleagues, even her office friend who had once helped me track her down. Rachel had destroyed our marriage without hesitation, and now it was her turn to face the consequences. With the immediate damage done, my focus shifted to Henry. I booked a flight to Michigan, determined to expose his betrayal to his wife, Amy. Armed with information Rachel had unknowingly provided over the years, I rented an apartment near Henry's home, blending into the background as I observed his life. Henry's wife, Amy, was nothing like I had expected. She was stunning, blonde hair, gray eyes, and a smile so genuine it felt out of place in the mess her husband had created. My initial plan was cold and calculated. Seduce Amy, let Henry taste the humiliation he had served me, and relish the chaos. But plans change. Amy wasn't just beautiful. She was kind and open-hearted, the sort of person who could make you forget the world's ugliness for a moment. As I spent more time with her, my intentions shifted. What started as a scheme to gloat turned into a genuine friendship. I even began seeing less of Henry, my anger toward him dimming in the light of Amy's kindness. But Henry's problems were far from over. He had recently lost his job, and I learned from Amy that he was frantically job hunting to keep up appearances. She confided in me about their marital struggles, how he had been distant, distracted, and unkind for months. It was clear that their relationship was crumbling, even before I intervened. Yet Amy's vulnerability gave me the leverage I needed to reveal the truth. When the time was right, I sat her down and showed her the video, the same one that haunted my own dreams. Amy's face crumpled as she watched the undeniable proof of her husband's infidelity. Her tears weren't the loud, dramatic kind. They were quiet and devastating, the sort that spoke of deep betrayal. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. We spent the rest of the evening planning how she would confront Henry. I wasn't there when it happened, but I made sure Henry knew I was the one behind his downfall. The last I heard, he was being deported, his life in tatters, a fitting end for a man who had destroyed so much. Satisfied with how things had unfolded, I began to piece my own life back together. I sent letters to people who needed to know the truth, friends, family, and colleagues of both Rachel and Henry. I wanted their stories to be known, their lies exposed. The letters were honest, brutal, and unapologetic. I wasn't interested in sparing anyone's feelings. One letter, in particular, reached a man named Ben Taylor. Ben was Amy's husband, or so I thought. As it turned out, the complexities of their relationship mirrored the chaos I was working to unravel. Ben's letter to those connected to Amy and her boss, Josh, was a confession of sorts, a way to bring their hidden lives into the light. Ben's letter began like this. To those who know Amy Taylor or Josh Long, I appreciate your time. Some of you may already suspect what I'm about to say. Others may be completely blindsided. Regardless, I feel it's important to share the truth about what has happened. I've struggled with this decision, knowing it may upset or even anger some of you, but I've made peace with the consequences. Attached to this letter is a photo. In it, you'll see my wife, Amy, and her boss, Josh, sharing what can only be described as a passionate kiss. The photo was taken 3 months ago during a company picnic. They believed they were being discreet, but a friend of mine, who happened to be looking for his children at the time, caught them. He gave me the photo, thinking I might need it. He was right. That's what a good friend does. I admit, after seeing the photo, I became the stereotypical jealous husband. I dug into every corner of their lives, desperate to uncover the truth, no matter how much it hurt. And it did hurt, more than I thought possible. The vows we made, the commitments we shared, they were shattered by their selfishness. I've spent countless nights asking myself why this happened. Was it my fault? Did I leave her alone for too long? Was it because of my work schedule? But none of those excuses apply. I've never served in the military, so it wasn't long deployments. I don't travel for business, and I rarely work overtime. I'm home by 5:30 most days, always ready to spend time with Amy. I didn't neglect her or take her for granted. If anything, I went out of my way to make her happy. Yet here we are. I've gathered undeniable evidence of their affair. Evidence I have no intention of using in court, but will present here, in the court of public opinion. If you're offended by explicit content, I advise against opening the attachments. But if you want to know the truth, it's all there. Ben's letter spread like wildfire, igniting conversations, arguments, and debates among everyone who received it. As I watched the fallout, I felt a strange sense of closure. Rachel, Henry, Amy, and now Josh. Their lives had all been laid bare, their lies exposed for the world to see. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. The people who had wronged me were finally facing the consequences of their actions, and I could move forward, knowing I had left no stone unturned. The HR director paused in the doorway, glaring at Josh with visible contempt. "You have 15 minutes to pack up your things," he barked, his voice icy. Then, after a moment's thought, he added, "No, make it 30. As we speak, Amy is being escorted out of the building. If you haven't already, check your email. Her husband's message is waiting for you." With that, the director slammed the door shut, leaving Josh trembling in his chair. His hands shook as he reached for his phone and opened his inbox. What had begun as a reckless, secret fling was now a storm that had torn through every corner of his life. He had convinced himself that the affair with Amy would stay hidden, that it was harmless, even fun. But their feelings had grown complicated, intensifying with every stolen moment. And now the truth was out. Promises to keep their marriages intact were dust in the wind. Josh's heart sank as he thought about Sonny. "Oh my God, Sonny," he murmured aloud, panic rising in his chest. Grabbing his phone, he dialed her number, not knowing what to expect. To his surprise, she answered, her tone calm, but unnervingly distant. "Hello," she said, her voice devoid of warmth. "Sonny, sweetheart," Josh began hesitantly, but she cut him off sharply. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice cold and precise, like a scalpel. "What's true?" he asked weakly, stalling for time. "Josh," she said, her tone hardening, "you have one chance to tell me the truth. Just one. If you lie to me, every conversation we have from this moment forward will go through lawyers. Now, is it true?" The walls were closing in. Josh's mind raced, but he knew there was no way out. He took a deep breath, tears stinging his eyes. "I'm so sorry, Sonny." "Yes, it's true." She didn't let him finish. "I'm packing 2 suitcases with your favorite things," she said curtly. "They'll be in the garage. Come get them while I'm picking up the kids from school. At least one of us has to act like the responsible adult here, especially when there are children involved. For now, I'll tell them you had to leave on a business trip. Understand this, Josh. If I decide we're not worth salvaging, you'll be the one to explain to our kids why their dad doesn't live here anymore. They might not understand now, but they will in a few years. I hope, for your sake, it doesn't push them away from you." Josh opened his mouth to respond, but she pressed on, her voice trembling with controlled fury. "Don't try to contact me. If I want to speak to you, I'll reach out first." There was a moment of silence, then a sudden, anguished scream. "Damn you, Josh!" Sonny shouted before hanging up, leaving Josh staring at his phone like it had turned into a venomous snake. The device slipped from his grip, hitting the desk with a dull thud. As if on cue, the phone started ringing again. Josh glanced at the screen, his heart sinking further when he saw Amy's name. Hesitantly, he answered. For a few seconds, the only sound on the line was quiet sobbing, punctuated by sharp sniffles. "Josh," Amy's voice was barely a whisper. "What are we going to do? He's my whole life. We were planning to start a family next year. I can't lose him. I just can't." Josh leaned back in his chair, his head heavy with regret. "What have we done?" he said aloud, more to himself than to Amy. "I love Sonny too. But let's be honest, Amy, there's no happy ending here. If we truly loved each other, we'd embrace our freedom and try to make a life together. But that's not what this was. We liked each other, sure, but we were never meant to be together. Not like this." Amy let out a shaky sigh. "Josh, I think Ben would understand if I explained that there was no love, just a mistake. Maybe that would help?" Josh shook his head, though she couldn't see him. "No," he replied softly. "Ben won't listen. The best thing you can do is stay as far away from me as possible. Every time he sees me, he'll remember what we did. I'll never be anything but a wound he can't heal." Amy's voice cracked. "I don't think it's a good idea for us to talk again," she said after a long pause. "If anyone finds out we're still in contact, it'll just make things worse for everyone." "I'm sorry, Amy," Josh said, his voice laden with sorrow. "I never wanted to hurt you." "I know," she replied with a sigh. "I hope things work out with Sonny. I know how much you love her." After a pause, she added, "Goodbye, Josh. And good luck." The line went dead, leaving Josh alone with his thoughts. He stared at the phone in his hand, numb to the world around him. Ben, true to his word, never spoke to Amy again. He refused negotiations and court-mandated counseling, opting instead to face contempt charges if necessary. His resolve was unshakable. He had been hurt too deeply to consider reconciliation, and he made no effort to hide his disdain for her attempts to mend fences. Amy's once carefully constructed life was now in ruins, while Sonny, her children, and Josh were left to pick up the pieces of their own shattered worlds. For Josh, every passing day brought fresh waves of regret as he grappled with the wreckage of choices he could never undo. The fallout from Josh and Amy's affair left a trail of destruction that refused to fade. Police officers took Ben's statement regarding his refusal to cooperate with court-mandated counseling, but without a clear case for an arrest, no warrant was issued. The judge expressed skepticism about Ben's defiance, but he was still sent to jail over the weekends as a consequence, released Sunday nights so he could continue working. Amy, Increasingly defeated, eventually canceled the counseling sessions entirely. Despite her initial determination to repair the damage, she came to accept that Ben's heart was irrevocably closed to her. She clung to a faint flicker of hope that time might soften his anger and that, one day, he might return. But that hope was extinguished when her mother brought her a clipping from a local newspaper announcing Ben's upcoming wedding. On Ben's wedding day, Amy succumbed to her emotions. For the first time in 2 years, she got drunk, drowning her sorrow in a haze of regret. Time, while unable to heal all wounds, eventually dulled the sharp edges of her pain. Slowly, Amy began dating again. She had 2 serious relationships, both of which ended before she could share her past. But finally, she met a man who loved her enough to accept her as she was, with no need to dig into her history. Their relationship blossomed, and they eventually married. For the first time in years, Amy was genuinely happy. Her past, however, shaped her future. At work, Amy was careful to maintain strictly professional relationships with men. Her colleagues, amused by her guarded demeanor, jokingly referred to her as the office nun. She avoided social events, preferring to focus on her family and her second chance at a happy life. 2 years later, Amy's new life was thriving when she unexpectedly crossed paths with Ben again. She spotted him at a local park during a routine stroll. He was sitting on a bench, seemingly lost in thought. At first, she wasn't sure it was him. His once robust figure was leaner, and streaks of gray now peppered his hair. As she debated whether to approach him, a tall woman with fiery red hair appeared, holding a toddler in her arms. Beside her was a young girl, no older than 6 or 7, her vibrant red curls bouncing as she leaped into Ben's lap. Amy froze, watching as Ben rose from the bench, kissed the woman tenderly, and took the girl's hand. Together, the family walked away, laughter ringing out as the toddler squirmed in his mother's arms. Amy felt a lump rise in her throat. This was the future she had once imagined for herself. Now it belonged to someone else. Fighting back tears, Amy turned and walked home. That evening, she prepared her husband's favorite dinner, choosing to focus on the life she had built rather than the one she had lost. Josh and Sunny. While Amy was forging a new path, Josh and Sunny were navigating the complexities of reconciliation. After 15 months of separation, Sunny agreed to give Josh another chance, but only under strict conditions. She insisted on counseling, both individual and as a couple, and implemented a rigorous prenuptial agreement that left no room for ambiguity. Josh's remorse was overwhelming at first, his apologies pouring out in an endless stream. Eventually, Sunny's patience wore thin. "One more apology," she warned him, "and I'm gone." Determined not to lose her again, Josh transformed into a different man. He rarely left Sunny's side, becoming a devoted family man who prioritized his wife and children above all else. His new job paid less than his previous position, but his hard work earned him steady raises and bonuses. Sunny, meanwhile, refused to give up her job, insisting on maintaining her independence. She occasionally went out with colleagues for drinks or attended quarterly seminars. Josh, though uneasy, respected her autonomy, knowing that her independence was a vital part of their new dynamic. Their life was different now, less idyllic, more grounded. But together, they worked to build a better future for their family. Reflection. One day, as Josh sat alone, he found himself calculating the total time he had spent with Amy during their affair. He estimated they had been intimate approximately 12 times, each encounter lasting between 30 and 45 minutes. At the most generous calculation, that amounted to about 9 hours, a stark contrast to the years of suffering and devastation their actions had caused. Was it worth it? Josh wondered aloud, the weight of the question settling heavily on his shoulders. The answer was painfully clear: absolutely not.